Yes, yes. The reception is
Okay,
recording now.
excellent, 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 great. Well, hi everyone, and welcome to our web conference on negative capability and psychotherapy. I will try to keep the session interactive, interesting, and not a boring lecture because I don't want anybody to go off to sleep. Okay, so I will definitely keep it very interactive and give you a chance to reflect and share your comments and share your thoughts with us as we go along. But please reserve the comments and thoughts to when I open it up for discussion. That way, I will cover one segment and then we'll go to the next segment. And between the two segments, we can have a short question and answer type session. Okay. Negative capability is a very nimble and yet highly involved concept. Okay. It has many variants, it has many perspectives, it's many different ways of looking at it. After all, it was a concept that arose from romantic poetry, believe it or not. John Keats, as some of you may have already heard about, was a very young poet in England. And in 1817, he talked about negative capability. And believe it or not, he only mentioned it once or twice in his entire life. Now, consider that. You're a poet and you're talking about something that you've only talked about in a letter to your brothers, all right, in 1817, and only once have you mentioned it. So something that you mentioned only once, 200 years later, takes on such a great significance. It becomes a canonical concept for you. So consider that. Consider the importance of an expression, a thought. So it was clearly a very rich expression, and I will get into that as we go along. So please know that in the 90 minutes that we are going to be together, I'm not going to try to make you experts in this. My hope and prayer is that you take away something from this session, give it your attention, give it to all your senses, all right, and continue your learning forward. Okay, and Dr. Alphonsa is going to share with you my PowerPoint deck. It has my contact numbers. It has an address to my LinkedIn profile. It has an address to my exhaustive, I say exhaustive, actually it's an elaborate YouTube channel where you can go and see many of my lectures, my presentations, my webinars on qualitative research. My specialty happens to be phenomenology, grounded theory, IPA, which a lot of you are going to use down the road for your thesis. It's called the interpretative phenomenological analysis. So my expertise lies in those areas. And I'm a very open person. I don't believe in titles. I don't believe in too many formalities. Feel free to reach out to me. I've also provided my WhatsApp number there. If you want to quickly connect with me there, send me a message. If you're struggling with something, things of that nature. So feel free, okay? And even in this session, please feel free. Don't get formal. Open your mind to questions. The only questions that are really, really dumb are the questions that were never asked. All right, just remember that. All right, so what I hope to do in the time that we'll be spending together is to provide you some basic information, okay, about negative capability, about how you can deploy negative capability as a competency, as an expertise in your work as therapists. Because today you're learning clinical psychology. Tomorrow you're going to be going further into the profession and become psychologists, hopefully. All right. So this is going to be a very powerful concept for you to learn and grow with. All right. So we are going to go to the next slide. Okay. There you go. So this is the psychotherapist's capacity to be with uncertainty is a defining but unsung feature of the profession. Now, what do I mean by that? So psychotherapists use many different strategies. They deploy many different techniques. They have a repertoire of expertise to draw from. They have different theoretical constructs. They follow different theorists such as Carl Rogers, and there's a client-centered theory, and Freud, and Wilfred Bion, and Melanie Klein, and you name it, and there's Erickson. Okay, all of these names are very familiar to you as clinical psychology students. And what is the goal, after all, of a therapist? Okay, so I'm not going to say psychotherapist. When I say therapist, I mean psychotherapist. All right. What is the goal of a psychotherapist, really? The goal of a psychotherapist is to make the client better, correct? And how do psychotherapists make the client better? Is it something that, is it like a switch that they turn on and off, that the client becomes better? What is it that they do? Or sometimes what is it that they don't do that makes the client feel more able to talk, more able to express to you openly, more able to cogently put together ideas that they have about their own problem? And for the purpose of this session and any future session that you'll be doing with me, please know that I do not refer to them as patients. Okay, patients is very, very clinical. Okay, it almost makes them feel that there's something broken with them, that there's something wrong with them that needs fixing. And at times, there are clinical issues, there are dysfunctions, there are DSM disorders that we have to address. But more often than not, it is a struggle that they're having. It's an emotional cobweb in their mind. They're stuck somewhere, and they're not able to get out of that cobweb. They're going round and round and round. So one of the expertises or one of the techniques that psychotherapists use is the capacity to stay with uncertainty. Is the capacity to stay with uncertainty, with not knowing what they're dealing with. Because when you have a client come to you, the client does not immediately share with you what's going on. The client doesn't tell you what's going on, right? So, but you want to know, as a psychotherapist, as a therapist, you want to know what's going on with the client. Because until you have the data, until you have this feedback from the client, you are not going to be able to address the client's issues. So you have to plunge yourself in this state of uncertainty. You meaning the therapist. Okay. So, Dr. Alphonsa, can you move that to the next slide? All right. So you were thinking I'm going to give you a boring lecture, go on and listen to my own voice. Guys, I'm going to put you on the spot now.
Isn't it up?
So I'm opening up this right now, this segment, to hear from some of you, not 169 of you, but some of you who would like to talk about this. What does uncertainty mean to you as a student, as a future psychologist, as a mental health counselor? What does uncertainty mean to you? I don't want you to define uncertainty. I don't want you to describe uncertainty. I don't want you to go into a theoretical spin about it. So I'm not looking for all that. I'm looking for a very basic thing. What does uncertainty mean to you? Anybody? There's a hand that went up. Shreya Chedda. Go ahead, Shreya. You can unmute yourself.
Sir, with reference to this context, I think uncertainty would be not knowing what the person is exactly feeling. So even if you are feeling even if anyone is feeling any negative emotion, the person will not be able to recognize that emotion is negative and harmful. Or for example, if let's say I'm having any mood swings, I will not realize that okay, I'm really having mood swings. So that thing, the discrepancy between knowing what exactly is going on and thinking that everything is normal, that I feel is uncertainty.
Very nice. That was very nice. So can you also share with me your experience of uncertainty? You're talking about somebody else's experience. You're talking about a client's experience. What is your experience with uncertainty?
No, no, actually, this was my experience, which I put it in
Oh,
the third person's words.
okay. Very nice.
So it's
Thank you.
like,
I really,
there was a point of time in my life when I had a lot of mood swings. But like only after 1 or 2 years, my friend, she told me, you know what, at that point of time you were having a lot of mood swings. And I was like, oh really, is it? So that.
nice. Very nice. So what, guys, what did just Shreya say? Sometimes we are not able to identify our own emotions. We are not able to put a let's say a description of what's really happening to us. All right, we know something's happening to us. We know we are troubled. We know that our mind is not calm. It is upset. It is troubled. It is anxious. But we are not able to figure out what's going on. So thank you so much, Fair. So Utkarsh, let's go with you. Can you unmute yourself? Okay. Alekhya. How about Alekhya?
Uh, so am I audible, Utkarsh? Yeah.
Oh, Utkarsh. Okay. Go ahead. I didn't see
Yes,
you
sir.
there. Okay.
Building on what Shreya said, yes, we have troubles isolating our own emotions. As in, I was reading an article about depression, and most of the times when someone is depressed, they don't exactly know what they are feeling gloomy about. It's a constant state of melancholy. So that failure of isolating one's emotion and the cause of it is one form of uncertainty. Yes, and again, there's this existential dread that always keeps following us, and one has to face that existential dread that the bare realities of life hold for us. That's again a form of uncertainty. This lack of control of how things in the universe would play out for us, and not knowing them is also something that contributes to the notion of uncertainty.
Mm-hmm. And how does it make you feel when you don't know what you don't know?
So then again, there would be multiple approaches to it. Like if looking for a more metaphysical explanation for it, we could adapt multiple philosophical standpoints like Stoicism or Epicureanism.
No. Yo. Wait. You are intellectualizing too much right now. This is what I'm saying. You are intellectualizing. I don't want a theoretical lesson on this. Remember, I said, I know you've got some great stuff going and you want to talk about all these theories. I'm saying, how does it make you feel when you're with a client and you don't know what's going on?
So I
When you're
simply
highly
believe
uncertain.
one has the capacity to alter their reactions to given feeling. So if one chooses to accept the uncertainties, will not be troubled by them. In spite of they'd rather be surprised and be amused by each moment that
I
unfolds before them.
and here's what my friends, my young friends, I will to share with you, and I'm not being critical, I'm being constructive. Here's what happens a lot of times. Okay, we put a third party spin over it. Okay, third person spin. You're referring to this. My question is to you, Utkarsh. How does it make you feel when you're uncertain? And you're telling me, how does it make that third person feel? I'm talking about you.
Yes,
How does it
exactly.
make you feel?
I'm talking about
See,
myself.
most so
I have
what happens?
simply
What tends to
accepted.
what? Yeah.
I've
How do you
simply
accept?
accepted.
How do you work with that anxiety of not knowing?
So it's as simple as the fact that like everything, even my mortality, is bound to happen, and so is the uncertainties with my life. They're bound to happen. So I don't really have any control of it, but just the fact that I can alter my actions towards my will. So I don't really feel anxious about it, but rather I look forward to it. So I feel
Okay.
more optimistic about it.
Ah, Interesting. Very interesting. Thank you for sharing that. By the way, I was not trying to put you on a spot. What tends to happen is one of the most difficult things, guys, you will learn in your studies is how difficult it is to put your thoughts into feelings. The moment you ask somebody, what is it that you're feeling, they have a struggle. They will start to describe somebody else's feeling. They will start to define something. They will have to put another spin on it, but they will find it difficult to say, what is it that you're feeling in the moment? Whether it is sad, are you sad, mad, bad, glad, right? What is it going on? So if you are not able to connect with your own feelings, your deepest emotions, how will you ever connect with the deepest feelings and emotions of your clients, right? It all begins with you, with yourself. I would like to hear from somebody else. Any other hands going up?
We have few responses there in the chat as well. If you want, I can go through the chat, or else.
Okay, we can keep the chat a little bit later. I want to hear from people.
Okay.
I mean, I'll definitely address the question in the chat at the end, but right now I want to hear from them. So if we have any hands going up,
yeah,
guys, don't be shy. Okay, put up your hand, and we will open the mic to you, or you can open the mic to yourself and talk. It's very important that you talk about this. Don't be bashful about this.
Sir, this is Joanne.
Joanne? Okay, go ahead,
Yes.
Joanne. Yes.
Sir, to me, uncertainty is feeling helpless about what's ahead.
Ah, nice.
Yeah.
Tell me more. Tell me more about this.
When I'm put into an uncertain situation, for example, when I was in this COVID-19 pandemic, initially I felt very helpless, and later on I was becoming aware that I'm feeling helpless, and then
nice.
I started to thank you, and then I started to accept that I am helpless, and yeah, so that's the way I went about it.
Wonderful. So how did it make you feel? To be in that state of helplessness, how does it make you feel?
It made me feel sad at times. It made me feel anxious at times. I was scared about certain things. Yeah.
Nice.
And even I was glad that I was at home. I could spend time with my family. I could spend time for myself. So, yeah, it was mixed feelings basically.
Wonderful. Very nice. Thank you for sharing that. Yes, that's great. That's great, Joanne. How about anybody else? Come on. We have 175 people here. Don't tell me nobody's having any feelings about uncertainty. You're in a profession where you're going to deal with uncertainty day in and day out. Go ahead. Ivy, who was that? Ivy D'Souza? Ivy D'Souza? Go ahead, guys. Who was that? Who would like to talk next?
Good evening. I am Upasna.
Hi, Upasna. How are you?
I'm fine. So, what I think about
Yes, go ahead.
Can I go on?
Yeah, please.
Okay. So, what I think about uncertainty is allowing yourself to feel the bad is also important. Like, you might be angry, you might be very upset at certain things, you might want to change other circumstances in your life, but it is important to sit down with whatever bad or um, disturbing feelings you might feel. It is important to sit down so that you can bounce back in a healthy way, not in a repressive or in an unhealthy way.
Okay, now you're talking about somebody else. So what happens to you when you are thrust in that situation? I want to hear from you. What do you feel?
the same thing actually. I allow myself to feel it, and then because honestly, I cannot go on for very long without doing anything about something. So first I
Mm.
just sit back so I don't do anything impulsive and damaging. But yes, after that, bouncing back is important.
Nice, nice. See, folks, the change that happens when you're talking about as though this is happening to somebody else, and when you start talking about yourself. So when you bring it to yourself, you start to realize how powerful this construct is about uncertainty. We are thrust with uncertainty all the time, not only from the standpoint of the pandemic, but all across. We are always in a sea of uncertainty, in an ocean of uncertainty, especially in this psychotherapy, psychology, counseling realm. You're going to be dealing with uncertainty all the time. You're not going to know what's going on. And as a therapist, you're going to try to figure it out. But it's a very difficult. So I'm going to take one or two more, and then we're going to move on to the next slide. But I definitely want to hear from somebody else. Thank you, Pasna, by the way.
Sir, could I speak?
Go ahead. Who's this?
So my name's Ananya.
Ananya, go ahead, Ananya.
Yeah. To put it in a single word, I think for me, uncertainty brings up the feeling of anxiety. As someone that likes to plan a lot and be in control of things in my life, I think something being uncertain for me tends to make me feel very anxious and like lost in my thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
I have a tendency to want to write down all the possible outcomes and see how to deal with if something doesn't go the way I plan it, to think of alternatives. But in a more positive sense, uncertainty has also made me learn better coping mechanisms. So to like breathe and be in the moment. So I think uncertainty also teaches me,
nice.
but probably way easier than said. But yes.
Nice. And sometimes it's very hard in a big meeting like this, 179, 180 people to talk, because we feel, oh my goodness, is what I'm going to say going to be even useful? Am I going to trip up myself? But one of the things you learn, especially in this profession, is speaking, verbalizing. Because you're going to learn the Freudian method, the talk therapy, the psychoanalysis, and even in counseling, you allow people to talk, right? Because if we don't allow people to talk, what tends to happen is they will shut down, okay? They will think that you want to hear your own voice all the time, okay? So it's very, very critical to allow the space for others to come forward and talk. All right. So I'm going to take one quick one. Sanjana wanted to say something. Who was that? Did anybody else want to talk before we move on?
Sir, can I go? Savia here.
Who's this? Savia.
This is Savia.
Okay, go ahead, Savia.
Yes, sir. I think uncertainty.
Okay.
Savia. Yes, sir.
Savia. Okay, go
uncertainty
ahead.
For me would be not having a plan in hand. So, and there are two ways that I look at it. One way is if I can control the situation, one way in which if I cannot control the situation. If I can control it, I start working on a plan. If I can't control it, I start bracing myself for the impact.
So it's all about control. If you're not able to control something, if you're feeling very uncertainty, feeling a lot of uncertainty, you're feeling anxiety, you're surrounded by a sense of not knowing, you feel a loss of control, right? And when you feel a loss of control, it's not a great feeling to be in, right, Savia? Right?
It's not.
So how does it make you feel? then you lose control.
It basically gets me to start bracing for the impact, or like basically hoping for the best and preparing for the worst kind of a situation.
For the worst. Wow. So see, as folks, so there's a dialectical tension there. You don't know what's going to happen, and you're on the other hand, you're preparing for the worst. You're hoping for the best and preparing for the worst. There are two polarities that you're working with, right?
Yes,
and the
sir.
feeling of dread, feeling of not knowing where you're going, where your life is going, what's going to happen down the road, especially with the pandemic. What could be more uncertain? I mean, here we are talking about people dying, people getting infected, people having long-term symptoms from the disease, right? You don't know if you're going to wear a mask. You go to a grocery store, even with a mask on, you don't know whether you're going to come away picking up the infection. How much more uncertain that can be, that the air that you breathe may be carrying those virus particles. I mean, it's mind-boggling. This has not happened to us in 100 years. The last time the pandemic was in 1918 or whatever, way back when. So this is huge, and that's why I wanted to open this floor for you to speak, because I want hopefully you to start thinking about how does it mean to you? How does uncertainty mean to you? Not about the third person. You have to connect with your own deepest feelings about what's going on with you. All right. So, Dr. Alphonsa, let's go to the next slide. There you go. Okay. So now you guys are wondering, what is negative capability? Negative and capability, it's an odd juxtaposition. On the one side is negative, on the other side is capability. What is this animal, negative capability? Well, negative capability is an expression, you could read from the slide. It's an expression that was coined by the famous English poet John Keats in 1817. It is a unique capacity to stay with mysteries, doubts, and uncertainty without the irritable reaching after fact and reason. So if you notice in the second bullet point, or in the second box, I put quotes around two different stems of this entire sentence. The capacity to stay in mysteries, doubts, and uncertainty, that is in quotes, right? Without the irritable reaching after fact and reason. I put quotes around that too. So look at this as two parts. This to stay with mysteries, doubts, and uncertainty without irritably reaching after fact and reason. So there is a tension there, if you notice. So on the one hand, you want to stay in that not knowing, not anxious mode. On the other hand, your mind is trying to look for a solution. And think about when you're working with clients, okay? You are thrust upon with a lot of not knowing. You don't know what's going on. You're asking the client what's happening. The client doesn't know what's happening to them. I'm feeling panicky. I'm feeling troubled. I'm histrionic or whatever, or my mood swings, or I'm getting anxiety all the time. My hands are sweating all the time. So there's a lot of uncertainty. You don't know what's going on. Now, you are not a psychiatrist, or you're not a doctor that you will just tell them, oh, pop some anti-anxiety pills or some antidepressant medication. You are a therapist. You're going to be doing deep work with the person. You're trying to find the psychology behind it. What's the cause? What's really occurring there? And sometimes it's difficult to find that. So you're in a state of knowing and not knowing, which is a very turbulent state to be in, this state of knowing and not knowing. So in lay terms, negative capability would mean staying with knowing and not knowing, certainty and uncertainty, which we are talking about right now. It is about resisting the impulse or pressure to react or explain what's going on with the client. So the client is sharing with you all of this stuff. And, some therapists have an immediate, even before they're listening to the client, They're already formulating an intervention, a diagnosis. They're talking about a diagnosis. They're talking about, oh, here's what you do, and this thing will go away, right? And that's terrible because you haven't even heard what the client is going through. You have no idea what the client is going through. And you're already making all these assumptions about the client. So this pressure that you feel inside you as an expert, as a psychologist, as a counselor, as a therapist, you feel you're the expert, so you know more than what the client knows. Well, that is not true. You have to figure out what's happening. And that process of figuring it out, that process involves working with the client, not working at the client. You have to work with the client to uncover issues. And you know, a lot of times therapists make the mistake of speaking, or talking, to the point that they're talking about 70% of the time, and the poor client is not even getting 20% chance to talk. Guys, it should be the other way around. If you cannot get your client to share openly, to talk openly about what they're expressing or feeling, your therapy is going to go down the tubes. You're not going to be able to really make any difference in the client's life. So you have to allow the client. Now, how do you allow the client? That's the question that some of you are probably pondering. How do you bring them out? Do you address the issue head on? Do you not address the issue? Do you say something? Do you not say something? What do you do to create a therapeutic alliance? That's the next box. We say it would mean creating a negative space. A negative space is a space of nothingness. Think about it as the shunya, as the zero, which is nothing, but also contains everything. So it's a space that you, as a therapist, create for the clients, with the clients, so that the clients feel an alliance with you, that they are there, that they are willing to talk about their issues, they're willing to talk about what's going on with them in a way that's going to be helping them. All right. So this therapeutic alliance, which you will, of course, learn a lot about in therapy and psychology and counseling and all of that stuff, is a very important aspect. Okay. Let's move to the next slide. Okay. So the expression negative capability is an oxymoron. What is an oxymoron? An oxymoron is a rhetorical expression which has two words that seem the opposite of each other. For instance, let's look at the first one, deafening silence. Have you ever heard the expression, your silence is so loud, right, that I'm deafened by it? Well, wait a second, you might wonder, this person is not even speaking, so why am I feeling deafened? Why am I feeling perturbed by someone's silence, right? Or tough love. So in deafening silence, deafening and silence. Doesn't make sense, right? Tough love. Oh, have you heard your professor say, Alphonsa might say, hey, listen, you know, you're my students, and look, I can be very congenial with you. I can be very good with you. I can do all of that stuff. But hey, if you're not producing your work, if you're not bringing in your papers on time, if you're not turning in your assignments, I'd have to get tough with you. You know, as a professor, she loves each one of you, right? As a professor, as an educator, I love all my students. But if my students are not meeting, not forget about my expectations, they're meeting their own expectations. They're there for a reason, to learn, to grow, to acquire knowledge, and they're not doing some of that stuff. It's kind of like I would have to say, hey, I'd have to give you a C grade. Tough love, man. You're not stepping up. let's talk about what's going on. Or something like living death, right? Or have you heard of the expression, the person is like a living dead person. The person is living, but in reality is hardly moving, doing anything with their life. It's going through life like a living dead. So these are rhetorical expressions. So think of negative capability as two parts, negative and capability, which are both contradictory and paradoxical. So negative in the expression negative capability is not the opposite of positive. Negative is shunya. In Hindi or in Sanskrit, they call it shunya, zero. The space that is being open. Think of it as an open space that you create in therapy, in counseling, in psychology, for clients, with clients. And capability as an expression we always think about as in a positive sense. We think of capability as a very positive thing. But really, capability is about knowing, is about doing, is about making things happen. It's about action versus reflection. So if you think of negative as a reflective space, think of positive as a space in which you want to fix things for your clients. You want to do things, right? It's all about action, action, action. On the other hand, it's about reflection. So the word capability is in fact a capacity. It's a capacity. It's the therapist's capacity, a conscious endeavor to bear the pain and terrifying pressure to not react. So think about this. Let's stay on this for a second here. The terrifying pain to not react and instead create a negative space to the client. So I want to open this part up for another very short round of discussion with you. And I'd like to hear from you what this last box means to you as a therapist, as a future therapist. Anybody? I have several hands that have gone up. Ananya's hand has gone up, or Savya's hand is up. Anybody else would like to say something about this? I'd like to hear from someone who has not spoken yet. So what does it stir up for you? Go ahead. You have to unmute yourself to talk.
Sir, can I speak?
Yeah, who's this?
Sir, I'm Amulya.
Amulya. Okay, go ahead, Amulya.
Sir, are you asking what this term of negative capability strikes as?
Yeah, so how does it strike you as the word capability and the capacity, a conscious endeavor to bear the pain? What is this pain? What is the pain I'm talking about? The pain and terrifying pressure to you as a therapist, not to the client. Client is of course in pain and not knowing and anxious. But what is this pain and terrifying pressure to not react?
Yeah. So I think you did state it because like even considering myself, my reaction is normally to do something. It's mostly active, to go about and work something out.
Okay.
But
okay.
why it would be negative is because I have to hold myself back. Like something like what they say, silence is sometimes the best thing to do.
Correct. Silence is sometimes the best response. Yes.
Yeah. But it's quite the hardest thing, and hence the pain.
Very, very. And what is hard about silence sometimes, Mulya, is that we project something into somebody else's silence. Let me give you an example. So if a person that you're very close to, somebody that you're dating, your husband, your spouse, your client, there's a closeness develops with the person, right? And the person suddenly does not talk.
Yeah.
How does it make you feel? You might think, oh, my goodness, I must have said something wrong. I must have done something wrong that the person is silent, right?
Yeah.
And you project your own fears, your own anxieties, your own perturbations into somebody else's silence. And that person may be silent not because of you. There may be something else going on in the person's life. But see how we tend to make it about ourselves, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
We make it seem as though that we have done something wrong. So you have to avoid getting into this trap of feeling that you've done something wrong. If the client suddenly goes silent, doesn't want to talk, do you start talking a lot, hoping that the client will open up with you? More often than not, the client is not going to open up with you. Sometimes you have to mirror the client's silence. You have to, as the therapist, become silent, correct?
Yeah.
And what is it that you're doing? When the client is silent and you're silent, what is it that you're creating there with the client? You're creating a negative space. Not negative as in, not negative as the opposite of positive, but you're creating a space where the client feels able, willing, and motivated to discuss what is happening with them. So for you, it's the pain and terrifying pressure, because if you're called upon as a counselor and you're being paid a fee for your charges to help this person, you feel helpless. Somebody else before you had talked about helplessness, this feeling of helplessness, of feeling of not knowing, feeling of anxiety. So you're being paid by the client to do what? To help the client, right? So your pain and pressure come from this ability to stay in that space instead, versus getting in there and trying to fix the person's situation. Right, Amole?
Yes. Yeah.
Right. Great. Thank you so much. Yeah. Anybody else who would like to say something? You just go ahead and unmute yourself.
May I speak?
Yeah, Shreya, go ahead.
So does that mean that if we truly are able to empathize with the client, then we are actually able to stay silent? But is like if we are not able to stay silent and letting the client speak, is it a sign of the fact that we are not able to empathize with the client?
It may well be that. It may well be that you're not a good listener at all.
Okay.
Right? It may be because you're not a good listener. Your mind is totally full with what you want to do for the person. You don't even know what the person is struggling with. How can you know what is best for the person, for the client?
Right.
So when you stay silent, your capacity to stay, let me tell you folks, silence comes from a unique tendency in some people to be patient, okay? They have a tendency that they can get into patience, a mode of patience. Well, not everybody has that capacity to be patient. So if you're not patient, you'll find it hard to be silent, because you'll always want to say what's on your mind rather than listen to what's on the client's mind. So thank you for sharing that. Anybody else? This is a very important topic right now. This is at the heart of negative capability. If you miss this opportunity, you're going to struggle with it later and the session will have ended by then. So go ahead. Anybody else?
So would you share how to actually inculcate the ability to stay silent?
That is my entire presentation with you. This is what
But then,
I'm
like,
trying to.
how to actually take ourselves to a stage where we can be silent both externally and internally.
But this is not a magic pill I can give you, Shreya.
Yeah,
This takes work.
of course.
It takes work. This is why Dr. Alphonsa has set up this session with you. And this session is not at the end of the session, you'll suddenly become heroes and know how to do it. Your learning has to continue. You have to read up. I've provided many resources. And when she shares the slide deck with you, you'll see many of my links. You can go ahead and listen, and you can interact with me if you have a question, if you have a struggle with something. I'm on WhatsApp. You can send me a quick WhatsApp note. I was in your session. I wanted to such and such. So we can do all of that. All right, but I cannot give you a magic bullet. There's no magic bullet here that I can say, take this and boom, now you're suddenly going to be able to be silent. It's a practice. It's an art. That's why in the beginning we called it reflective inaction. Reflective inaction. So you're not plunging yourself into action. You're in a reflective mode, but that reflective mode also is a very active state of mind. It's a very consciously triggered state of mind. Let's put it that way. Okay? Anybody else before we move on?
Sir, I wanted to talk about something as well, if that's okay.
Go ahead, of course.
I think one aspect of the therapist being silent that could also probably be helpful for the client is that if you stay silent and give someone the space to talk, oftentimes they're able to work through things themselves. And it's allowing them to process the sentences that they speak next in their own time. That allows them to kind of reflect as well. And I feel like that might be another positive to negative capability.
Wow, incredible. Congratulations. That was a very, very good description of that.
Thank
love
you, sir.
that. That's amazing. That's amazing. So by keeping silent, you are respecting that space. You're saying, you're communicating through your silence to your client that you're not full of yourself, that this is about them, this is not about you. And it allows them to reflect, it allows them to process. Because guess what happens when both sides are silent? One side will sooner or later speak. You can't be silent for one whole hour, right?
Yeah.
So
Yes.
Sooner or later, somebody's going to break that silence. And it better be the client that breaks that silence, not you. Because if you break the silence, you're going to shut down the client at that moment. Okay? So
Yes.
Great. That was a great job. One other quick one, and then we'll move on. Go ahead. My goodness, we've got 181 students here. I'm sure there are others who want to say something. Go ahead, please.
Sir, I would like to make a point.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So the thing is that the one
this?
phrase, sir, it's Meryl.
Meryl, Leila. Okay, great. Go ahead.
Okay. So the thing is that the pressure not to react is something which is innate. I find, like, impulsively, everybody just thinks about, okay, this is the thing. If nobody is speaking, okay, I'll speak, or I'll, let the conversation continue. Okay, my client is not speaking, fine, I will speak on the client's behalf also, and just maybe give them cues or prompt, but which is not actually right. We need to respond, not react. right? So
yeah.
So that was one thing which I think is a major pressure, and it's really terrifying because we realize it when we do it, but immediately we feel that no, that wasn't the right thing to do. So it is terrifying. That is the thing.
Yes, that is what I meant by the terrifying. I didn't mean somebody has put a gun to our head. It is the terrifying pressure to not react, because some of us are so quick to react, so impulsive, as you say, to react, to make sense of something, to interpret somebody's silence, to interpret somebody's speech, to make a judgment about somebody. We can't stay with half knowledge. We can't stay with not knowing. Not knowing is a very troublesome state of being. You know, how many times have you seen in class, if you're asked a question and by your teacher, and your response is, ma'am or sir, I only can give you half the answer. I will only give you half the answer. The other half I'm just reflecting on. Do you think you're going to be the most favored student there? Probably not. They're going to say, what do you mean by half the answer? Either give me the full answer or just shut up. So this half knowledge, this half knowing, this ignorance that I don't know what I don't know is a terrifying thing. Believe it or not, it's when I say use the word terrifying, I mean when you're in a therapy session, not a learning session like this, where we are in a safe space. In a therapy session, it can be a very turbulent state. You're dealing with a lot of difficult emotions, difficult feelings. There's a lot of tug of war going on inside you. Do I say something? Do I not say something? Do I make an intervention? Do I make a diagnosis? What should I do? That is where the pressure to react comes. And that is where negative, when your pressure to react, Meryl, is too high, right? That is where negative capability becomes all the more important to you. As a skill, as a competency, as an expertise to follow. So, well said. All right. Dr. Alphonsa, can we move to the next one, please? Thank you so much, Meryl. I appreciate it. Okay. So this is an amazing, now please stay with me. We are going to be talking in depth about this thing, what you see on the slide here. This is from Diana Voller, Contemporary Psychotherapy UK. I provided in the references section at the end of this presentation a direct link to that entire article. Okay, I would highly encourage you all. Not only does she break down negative capability into a skill, into a competency, but also describes it in a way that is very easy to understand. So she refers to therapists as double agents, not spies, but double agents. On the one hand, they know, on the other hand, they don't know. On the one hand, they're an expert. On the other hand, sometimes they have to be comfortable with their own ignorance. So let's read this together, okay? And thank you all for taking the chance and the risk to talk, because it really is a huge risk to talk, because and the risk is not only for you as a therapist to talk in a session like this. Believe me, even clients take a risk when they talk and share, because they may be holding on to something that is so precious to them. And now they come into therapy with you, and now they have to spill the beans to you about their own personal struggles, about their own shame that they're feeling, about their own remorse that they're feeling, about their own sense of inadequacy that they feel about themselves, that I'm not good enough. Yes, I was good enough to pass the test. Now I'm at IIT Mumbai, which people die to get into. But I'm feeling like a total failure. Believe me, hey, I have a counselor right there in Bangalore that I know. I have a great deal of respect for her. And she works with many IIT students that are saying to her, I don't know, I'm paralyzed. Paralyzed not physically. I'm emotionally, mentally paralyzed because I am in relationship with this girl and she doesn't understand me. She makes me all the time, when I talk to her, she makes me feel like an utter failure. It means nothing to her that I worked so hard, I worked my tail off to get into IIT. I'm an IITian, and yet I feel like a failure. Okay? You're going to get those share of clients who are brilliant, academically brilliant. Just because you're academically brilliant doesn't mean you're emotionally evolved. A lot of the people that I see and I talk to who are academically so enriched, so amazing, but they struggle emotionally. They struggle in the interpersonal relationships. They struggle with issues around communication because they're so full of themselves in their heads. Right? So in a sense that psychotherapists have to be both unknowing and demonstrate clinical expertise and knowledge. They have to be emotionally resilient. So this is the one part. You have to be comfortable with not knowing. You have to have the clinical expertise and knowledge, which you're gaining through your work as a budding psychologist. You have to be emotionally resilient. You have to be able to take in a huge dose of emotions from people that talk to you. And also be open to being discombobulated by the client. The client will dump so much on you that you're going to come away, you're going to go home thinking, what the heck, what kind of profession have I gotten myself into? That you'll start to feel that it's affecting you, affecting your personal life, affecting your profession. So this perturbed, you'll feel very perturbed by the client. So on the one hand, as therapists, you have to be experts at not knowing this, the experts at CBT or whatever psychological techniques or therapeutic techniques or Freudian stuff that you know, that's the one side. They have to be able to articulate to service providers and clients alike that they have theoretically informed, scientific, evidence-based approach. So what are they saying? Who are these providers? So when you work as a psychologist, you work either as a small psychology firm where there are other psychologists that are seeing clients, or you work for a company as a psychologist. So the providers need to know that you have the expertise, the knowledge, and the techniques to help clients. That you have a scientifically evidence-based approach, that you're not speaking off the seat of your pants, that you are well steeped into that. And I know that in India, probably after you do your bachelor's or even your master's degree in clinical psychology, you have to do some sort of an MPhil before you can actually practice psychology. Now, in the US, where I am, you need a licensing exam after your master's degree. You have to have a minimum of a master's degree, and you have to have a licensing exam before you can put yourself out as a psychologist, because licensure is required for psychologists. So the paradoxical term negative capability succinctly describes the notion of creatively deploying these two contrasting attitudes. So again, what was negative capability? It was the capacity to stay in mysteries, doubts, and uncertainty without the irritable reaching after factorialism. John Keats' expression in 1817. So there were two parts of it. On the one side, you want to stay in mysteries, doubts, and uncertainty. As a therapist, right? You have to stay in not knowing. On the other hand, you're resisting the impulse to react, as I was talking in the earlier segment. You have to resist the impulse to do something about it, to make an intervention with the client, to say, hey, here's what's happening to you, right? So this dialectical tension happening here between wanting to do something and not wanting to do something, between staying with certainty and not being in an uncertain mode. So this can be terrifying to a professional like yourself, to therapists like you, who are trying to. So I would encourage you to definitely read Diana Waller's article. It's a short article she's written, but it's a very, very interesting article. It will throw a lot of light on that. I've also shared with you one of my SAGE journal articles on negative capability, which is a condensed version of my own doctoral dissertation. Incidentally, friends, my doctoral work, my doctoral dissertation was done on negative capability. So even though I did my doctoral work, spent almost 7 years completing my PhD on this concept, I still am learning every single day about this construct. And every time I have a discussion such as this, I learn something new, something more enriching from you all. Okay. So the next slide, please. Challenges. So now you might ask, oh, so Dr. Bell, you described this negative capability. How challenging is it to stay in that mindset, and for how long? So I forget who it was, Ananya or somebody who had asked me. So what is it, sir, that we can do to be in that space? How can I practice that? And so I said, oh, it takes work, it takes a lot of training to be in that mode. But so the challenges in practicing negative capability are many. First of all, if you're not a very patient person, very patient therapist, okay, somebody who can listen, somebody who is comfortable with his or her own feelings and emotions, you're going to find it very difficult to practice negative capability. Number one. Number two, negative capability is not something that you practice, that you say, oh, I'm going to be in negative capability from 8 o'clock in the morning to 10 o'clock at night. Folks, it doesn't work that way. It's a technique. It's a conscious endeavor that you use for certain situations. So when you're with a client, you might use that technique of opening the space, creating the negative space, which allows the thoughts and feelings of others as well as your own thoughts and feelings to emerge. It's kind of like you're creating this imaginary space. And when clients feel that you've created this space, they are more able to talk to you. So the challenge is holding, containing, creating space for others, accepting ignorance, your own ignorance, folks. Your own ignorance and sense of not knowing. And living with uncertainties, mysteries, and doubts. Oh my God, you're going to say, oh my goodness, this is too much for me. I can't practice negative capability. I have to be holding someone's anxieties. I have to be containing that, containing not only them, but also containing yourself. I have to create the space for others, accepting ignorance of self and others, living with uncertainties. So, it's interesting that we come into certain professions because of what we may be struggling with ourselves in our lives, believe it or not. So a lot of people are drawn to therapy, counseling, psychology, psychiatry, somewhere deep down in their unconscious mind, have their own struggles with stuff. That is why they are drawn. Not always. Now, some are just drawn because they want to get into a nice profession where they can be this way. They want to help people. But a lot of times we seek out certain professions because there is something inside of us that is wanting to be set free, okay? That we are struggling with, that we don't know about. We want to learn more about. So if I have a tendency, I'm just taking an example, of having very sweaty palms the moment I'm anxious, right? I might want to learn something about it, right? Not only from a medical standpoint, but also from a psychological standpoint. What are the triggers? What are the emotional triggers? What happens to me when I get anxious? What happens? And how do I feel about my anxiety, right? So those are some of the things. Or if some people have panic attacks, right? They feel totally anxious, totally out of control. They don't know what to do. Sometimes I've had some people, some clients that have said, I've had to stop on the side of the road when I was having a panic attack because I thought I would meet with an accident. Or some people have obsessive compulsive disorder. And by the way, my work, as you will see, I've shared an article with you, Sage article. That link is right there. So you just click on the link and you'll go there. In that, I've talked about a correlation between negative capability and OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder. Okay. Obsessive compulsive disorder is, as you know, OCD is about a ritualistic behavior, right? You're trying to alleviate the anxiety, and the anxiety is causing you to get into a repetitive behavior, washing hands incessantly, okay, praying all day long, counting backwards from 100 to 1. And if you don't count backwards from 100 to 1, you feel as though something catastrophic might happen, right? Okay, checking the locks again and again and again before you go, like 10 times, 20 times, like once or twice you check the lock is fine. But if you continue to check the lock at least 6, 7, 8 times, why? Why do you get into the ritualistic behavior? The reason you get into the ritualistic behavior is because you have an unfounded fear in your mind that some catastrophe might happen. If I don't check the lock properly, if by chance the lock remains open, what if I drive out on my vacation, I go out on a holiday, and somebody gets into the house? Or, oh my goodness, you've already started out and you about 3 miles you've driven down, and you say to your wife or you say to your husband and say, oh my goodness, wait a second, I'm not sure if I put the gas off. Right? Now, in normal course, your husband or your wife is going to say, don't worry about it. Of course you checked it out. Hey, we checked it. No. Now, if you're an OCD person meaning if you struggle with OCD, mild to severe OCD, but even in mild cases, you will stop the car, you will turn around, you will go back, you will check, open the house, you will go check the gases, and then you'll come out again. Now, what did you just do? You were alleviating your anxiety. Why did you want to alleviate the anxiety? Because it was a terrifying pressure in you. That you won't be able to enjoy your holiday if you have that constant fear in your mind that, oh my goodness, what if the gas remained on? Now the whole house is going to have gas, and what if I go back and there's a match there, and boom, the whole house could explode. See, all of these things, 99% time, nothing is going to happen. But that 0.1% time, the 0.1% is enough for somebody who has a tendency for OCD to get engulfed in that behavior. So I have made a parallel between OCD and negative capability, because what is negative capability? Negative capability is the capacity to stay in that not knowing. So I had recommended that probably a CBT tool can be developed, a technique can be developed. And who knows, some of you reading my work might say, oh my goodness, a negative capability I can use as a cognitive behavior therapeutic tool to help OCD people. I'm talking about mild OCD or even medium cases of OCD, not severe cases that need deep psychotherapy, that need a lot of medications, okay, antidepressants and stuff like that. So the difficulty with containing systemic pressures. Now, so if you're working in an organization, you may have a lot of systemic type pressures, deadlines, competition, one-upmanship, urgency, provocation by your bosses. Do this, do that. And even though you want to be in a reflective mode, even though you want to learn and grow, to be patient, to be compassionate, to allow the space to others, you're so bogged down by these pressures, by these challenges, that you don't know what the heck to do. Okay? So please know that this is not something that you can flip a switch and tomorrow all of you are experts in this. it's a skill that you learn. You have to learn to master this art, master this technique, just in the way you're learning clinical psychology, right? You're learning, you're reading up on courses, you're doing a lot of lab work, you're doing a lot of, group work. So likewise, you have to practice this to be able to get this. But if you get this, you will have an amazing capacity to really be good at your work. So let's go to the next slide, please. So negative capability of reflective inaction. So now you might wonder, what is this reflective inaction? So yes, you're reflecting. Reflecting is you're putting your thoughts on something, you're thinking about something. But what about inaction? So isn't reflection a sort of action? I want you to think about this. Is reflection some sort of an action? So it is a conscious ability to sit with uncertainties, doubts, and mysteries when the regressive pull is too great, when you are pulled into something that you want to intervene, you want to do something about, you want to make a solution, you want to create a technique, you want to help. And you're doing this to help the client, right? The therapist must have the mental and emotional capacity to hold the paradox between action and reflection, doing and not doing, filling and emptying, while resisting the impulse to flee into dispersal. Because your impulse is to do something about it, to react, to flee into dispersal, to make a diagnosis. Because you want to help the client. You're not doing it for yourself, you want to do it for the client, but are you really doing it for the client if you don't even know what the client is struggling with, right? So it is this capacity to be patient enough to make enough negative space and room for clients' thoughts and feelings to come out. To allow the client to share with you their deepest feelings, their deepest emotions, their deepest struggles. And you've all heard that the first and foremost thing in therapy or any other mental health type relationship is trust, trust, trust. If they don't trust you, believe me, they are not going to share anything with you. If they feel that you're not going to keep their data confidential, that the moment they share something with you, you might share it with somebody else, they're not going to tell you. I've had conversations with some very astute counselors and psychotherapists and psychologists who have had, and I'm not going to name anybody here, but who have had the most distinguished IAS officers. I mean, really distinguished, big shots. To them and spill the beans about their fetishes, their obsessions, their challenges that they're having working with people. Okay, but I'm talking about like deep challenges, deeply disturbing things that I'm not at liberty to discuss here. So you're in a profession where you're going to come across much of this stuff. There's a lot of this stuff happening. With India becoming one of the largest global emerging economies in the world, and everybody's eyes are on India and China right now. Believe me, we're also, along with all the affluence that is coming in, with all the growth that is coming in, we have also had a ton of other problems that are coming in. And a lot of these problems remain under the surface. Traditionally, and I'm going back 30 years, 35 years, nobody wanted to talk about therapy. Now everybody wants to talk about therapy, right? So you are in a very, very blessed profession, okay? But these are some of the techniques you'll have to learn to really grow as a therapist. So let's go to the next slide. I think this is probably the end of the, okay. So this is just a slide. I want to share this quickly with you. Out of the mud of chaos, this is the lotus flower, right? So the lotus flower grows in filth, slush, mud, dirt, grime. But look at the beauty that comes out of that. So out of the mud of chaos, uncertainty, and doubt grows the lotus, unstained as it were by certitude and the doctrine of knowledge. So even though it grows in dirt and filth and grime, that dirt, filth, and grime cannot touch its beauty, cannot mar its beauty, cannot corrupt its beauty. So you have to be like that therapist, right? Or the psychologist, whatever it is, who deals with these, what are the dirt, grime, doubts, uncertainty? You're dealing with all the messiness of a client's problems. And yet you remain like that blossoming lotus that the clients can look up to you in the form of an encouragement, in the form of an inspiration. You become like the support for them. They come out of the session and they say, "Whoa, my God, this was amazing. I did not even know this about myself." So you are like a sounding board. You are like a mirror that is reflecting back to them. So be like that lotus that they can look up to you, right? And even though you're being affected by all of their stuff meaning all of what they share with you, you're still able to come out of that as an astute therapist, as a good interventionist. So let's go to the next slide. Okay, so this is my contact information, folks. Okay, my email address is there, my website, my WhatsApp number, LinkedIn profile, my YouTube channel link is there. My entire channel is full of like about 24 presentations, lectures on qualitative research, IPA, phenomenology, grounded theory, content analysis, thematic analysis, ethnography, you name it, and it's there. So all throughout this year, believe it or not, I created because of the pandemic, we were all homebound. So I put myself to this and created all of these resources for you all to be able to see. Next slide, please. Okay, so here are the readings and references. I didn't want to give you and overwhelm you with too much, but I wanted to at least share with you some reading. So the first one is a negative capability. This is a my own article that I wrote. I'm sorry. This is the. I have a book on Amazon. Okay, if you guys wanted to either buy the book or you wanted to get the Kindle version of the book, this is the link that takes you directly. That is on the Amazon India. Okay, my book is there. The second one is on Sage reprints. I was talking about the Sage Journal article. This is the article you can read in its entirety if you click on that link. The third is Diana Woller's Contemporary Psychotherapy. Beautiful, beautiful article. I would encourage you all to read that. Okay. So this is the end of my presentation with about 5 or 10 minutes left. I think what I wanted to do was to ask you what it meant for you to be a part of this session. What was it like to be in this session? And more importantly, what was it like for you to experience this new construct? I open the floor to anybody that wants to talk.
Sir, may I?
Yeah, who is this?
Shreya again.
Go ahead, Shreya.
Okay, so I think this was very helpful. I did listen a lot of videos about silence, maintaining silence within and even outside, and the importance of it. But the thing is, I just knew it. I never really understood it. But after listening to you, I actually understood the essence of it. And I also understood the places where I went wrong in my, behavior, or maybe in just reacting, as we say so. So I think now I'll actually consciously focus on inculcating this thing.
Wonderful. I'm glad you learned that. Great. Who else? Come on, let's hear from those that have not talked at all. Come on, does your silence show that this was such a boring lecture that Dr. Alphonsa had you attend? Was it so boring, guys, that you have nothing to say? Go ahead. You can unmute yourself and talk.
Sir, I think there's some difficulty with some people trying to unmute, and hence the voice is not coming through.
Oh, is that right? Okay.
I see some people unmuting, but there isn't any voice coming through.
Okay, maybe we can stick with the chat then in that case. For those
Okay, yeah,
who
we can go to the chat. Yeah, so in the chat, you can put it in the chat, and Dr. Alphonsa, if you can also capture the chat data so that I can field some of those questions later, because I'm just being mindful of the time boundary. Okay.
Yes, sir.
I'm okay. I'm okay with staying longer. I don't want to keep the students longer because I know it's already 1.5 hours. So I'm perfectly okay if everybody wants to stay for another few minutes. I'm totally okay with that.
I'll read out a question there on the chat box.
Okay. Yeah, in case if anyone has an issue with the quiz, you can go ahead with the chat box. Is it Brian who's speaking?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, take over, Brian.
So a question that was there in the chat box was, sir, I want to ask you, if a client comes to us with a horrendous sexual or abusive or fatal trauma, how do we help them?
Can you just talk a little louder? Can you talk a little louder,
sir? Yes. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now. Okay, good.
Okay. So the question goes like this. Sir, I want to ask you, if a client comes to us with a horrendous sexual or abusive or fatal trauma, how do we help them pace it without ever experiencing it and without empathizing with them? Because sometimes we may not be able to empathize with something that we do not have a first-hand experience of. That was the question that was asked.
All right. So your question is, how would you empathize with something that you have not experienced yourself? Correct?
Yes.
Is that what your question is? So somebody's coming to you with a trauma, sexual experience, or physical abuse or whatever, and we're not able to empathize with that, right? Okay. So in order to answer your question, let me share one of my experiences in my early days. Okay, if that's okay with you. So I had a client who shared with me. She had living a normal life in the U.S. Husband, son, doing well. She was herself doing well. He was doing well, and she shared with me. And I'm not a therapist per se, but I've had psychoanalytic training, so I was working more with her as a life coach. But she went into areas that she wanted to discuss with me. She said, every time, now listen to this carefully, she would narrate to me that every time she would go to a temple, right? And she's a Hindu person. Go to a temple and see the musicians, sometimes in the temple there's some bhajans are going on and tabla and Panditji is sitting there. She said, the moment I would step in and I would hear that, right, that music, and especially looking at the Master Ji or Pandit or whoever is playing the tabla and all that, she would freeze. She would like totally feel immobilized. She would freeze. And now, I just happened to ask her, I said, would you like to talk a little bit more about why that happened? She would not say. So I said, you want me to refer you if you are feeling some trauma around whatever that your issues with this. I'm not a therapist, but I can refer you to some counselor, some therapist. She said, no. I feel that I can trust you. I can share with you. So apparently what was going on was in her earlier days, now she's about 32 now, 32, 33. When she was about 8 years old, or 8 or 9 years old, her parents, and this is in India back then, she's now in the US, but back then in India, wherever she was, somewhere in Punjab, her parents wanted to have a Master Ji, a musician, come to the house who they really trusted to teach her music. Okay? So the Master Ji would come to the house, and they trusted this older gentleman. She was only about 8 or 9. He was about 30 or 25 or 28, or much older than her. And so he would go in, he would have his harmonica there, and he would start to play, and then she would be singing, and they would close the doors. And apparently what was happening was he was inappropriately touching her in her private places. And this went on for a number of years, and he would almost like threaten her that if she ever mentioned anything to her parents or somebody, he would stop coming. And she was very, very fond of music, learning classical music and all that, and he would stop coming. So she sort of like internalized that trauma. I'm not going to go into more details, more graphic details, but she internalized that trauma, deeply internalized that trauma, to the point that she is, so many years later, comes to a temple and she sees that tabla and musician, and she freezes. And she started to have sexual difficulties with her own husband. She was afraid, totally afraid, paranoid about intimacy, physical intimacy, emotional intimacy with the husband. And she would stay away from him. And he would not understand what's going on. So the question is, how would I handle that? Now, I was not the one experiencing that, but I can certainly empathize with what she's going through. I can help her make sense of that it was not about her. She had started to feel demonized by the experience, and she felt as though at 8 years old, she did something wrong to lead this man on to sexually molest or abuse or whatever the case may be. So you can still have empathy for someone that is going through a trauma without actually experiencing the trauma yourself. That is what empathy is about. Empathy is about creating a non-judgmental space where you can allow the client to share with you in a trusting way everything that the client is going through. Because when they come to you, you are the expert. You for them are the support. You for them are like the anchor. And if you let them down, they can feel terribly damaged. So please know that empathy is not something that gets enacted only if you as a therapist have experienced it. It can get enacted other ways too, okay? And it is your own warmth, your own compassion that brings out the empathy. So I don't know if that really answered your question, but I had to share that experience with you because it came right into my mind as something that was very a difficult experience, both for me and for her to handle. Of course, then I later referred her to a therapist, and she, I think, went through a couple of years of therapy, and hopefully came out of that. I've not been in touch with the client after that. So anyway, if and does anybody else have anything to say? Come on, guys, this is your chance before we wrap it up.
Sir, I would like to ask,
Go ahead.
is it
Who's
the
this?
same way? This is Brian Thomas.
Yes.
Do the way we interact with clients and the way we interact with someone we personally know, should it be the same way or should there be differences?
Okay, so this you bring up a very important question. Negative capability becomes very, very hard to practice the closer and more emotionally vested you are in a relationship. So let's say you have a girlfriend, or let's say you have a wife, okay, or let's say with your father or with your mother, with whom you're very emotionally connected, or with siblings, your sisters and brothers. It's very difficult to practice negative capability. But when you're in a more objective situation, like when you're in a therapy session with a client, you can keep yourself apart. And you have to be able, and not to detach emotionally from that experience, but to objectively step away so you can be both an observer and a participant in that dialogue. And that a negative capability allows you that skill or teaches you that skill to be both, to be present as an expert. Remember in the previous slide, I was talking about how you have to be like the expert. And this is where the double agent comes through. So when you're with someone very close, it's very difficult to say, because you are so closely vested emotionally with that person. And with a client, it's relatively easy, but I'm not saying it's extremely easy, but it's relatively easier to practice negative capability as a tool, as a technique with clients. Anybody else? Anyone else?
Can I say?
Go ahead. Who's this?
I'm Amulya.
Amulya. Okay, go ahead, Amulya.
Yeah, no, sir. I just want, you were asking for how the session was.
Go ahead, please.
Yeah, like I felt it really brought in the importance of something that maybe I would not really look into if it wasn't brought to our this thing as a session. So I mean,
okay.
Yeah, so and like Shreya, I guess shared before, it was something I think I considered as will come with practice, and I know it will, but now I know that I need to put the effort, and I have to really look into it and understand or actually try practicing it before going for like before I maybe take that step professionally. I'm not sure. Yeah.
Wonderful. And I've asked, and I know that in a 90-minute session, there's so much material that gets stirred up, especially in this kind of a topic. And I've requested Dr. Alphonsa to capture the chat, whatever appeared in the chat box. So if she can just cut and paste that into a document and send it to me, I'd be very happy to provide any answers to any queries that you've raised, which we were not able to talk here. And this is always a problem with the webinar kind of thing. Sometimes you get technology glitches, such as this, when people are wanting to talk and they cannot talk and all that. But hopefully, a lot of you have shared in the chat box. I am just looking at, there's a lot of material. Wow, this is amazing. So a lot of you have shared. A lot of material has gotten shared. That's great. Excellent. So as a matter of fact, this is very useful material to be working with. So if you can please Dr. Alphonsa, send me that chat. I'd really love
Yes,
to
sure.
hear about
Sure,
it,
I'll be
because it
sharing.
gives me an idea of what was getting stirred up for a lot of people as they were going through this, because it's a difficult concept sometimes to deal with, And so with that, unless and nobody else has anything to say, go ahead, Dr. Alphonsa. Anything else you'd like to say?
Yes, sir. This is Utkarsh.
Yes. Yes, Utkarsh. How
Sir,
are you?
I saw your book about phenomenalism, and
Yes, phenomenology.
yeah, and I cannot help but find parallels between negative capacity and phenomenology, because in negative capacity also we have to keep an active state of mind while being passive about it, right?
Uh-huh.
And what I have gathered about phenomenology is basically trying to find structures into realities of life as they are while being passive about it, yet keeping our mind active. So are they really
Mm-hmm.
somewhat parallel, or are they entirely different concepts that are not related at all?
You asked a short question to a very long answer. So I don't want to. If I start on that, we'll be sitting here another half an hour. So let me deal with that separately, if you like, and maybe you can write to me or about this, or send a note to Dr. Alphonsa, and we can certainly take it up. But you've asked a very pertinent question, and I'd love to do that, and to share a little bit more about that in a later session, maybe, or something. Right? Is that okay?
Yes, Utkarsh.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. So if anyone doesn't have anything more to share, we will wind up this session. And over to you, Brian.
It gives me immense pleasure to place on record my gratitude to Dr. Anil Bihal for such a beautiful and informative webinar. We have really understood the importance of silence and why we need to use this. I would like to also thank our director, Father Biju Casey, and Dean of BGR campus, Dr. Jyoti Kumar, for supporting us throughout our endeavors. Also, I would like to express genuine gratitude to Dr. Vijayalaya Srinivas, our coordinator, and Dr. Yogesh Khanna, faculty coordinator of the Psychology Association, and would especially like to thank Dr. Alphonsa Jose, assistant professor, Department of Psychology, for bringing in this session for us. I sincerely thank all the faculty members of the Psychology Department and members of the Psychology Association, without whom this workshop would not have been possible. Lastly, I would like to extend huge gratitude to the audience for being so accommodative, disciplined, and interactive. Once again, thank you all. This is Brian Thomas from Forsyth signing off. Thank you and have a great evening. With this,
and thank you all,
we come to
and have a great evening. Okay, take care.
Thank you, sir. With this, we come to the end of today's session. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you all, and I would like to place my note of gratitude to Dr. Anil Bihal for accepting this invitation and finding time to interact with all of us. And also, I will be sharing this record, also the presentation with all of you. And like Utkarsh or anyone else has any more queries, you can definitely contact Dr. Anil, and I'm pretty sure that I will be more than happy to have more conversations with you guys all.
Yes, yes. I would like to continue. This is not the end. This is the beginning of this journey together.
Yes. So with that note, maybe we'll wind up for now. And we will look forward to having more and more interactive sessions like this. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Dr.
everyone.
Alphonsa. I appreciate it. You take care. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir.
Bye-bye.
You may all disperse now.